Good evening and welcome to the Dreary Midnight Podcast. My name is Lisa, my pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste, my pronouns are she, her.
And this is Celeste's first lead episode.
Yay!
Woo!
I'm so nervous.
You'll do fine, I'm sure.
I feel like I did so much research and yet not enough research.
Hello, my life for the last year. Also, as Anchor so kindly reminded me the other day, happy 1 year to my Anchor account for the podcast. The first episode wasn't until March the 5th, but, you know, the internet, I guess, never forgets when your anniversaries are, even if you do.
I love that it's called Anchor, and we're going to talk about a ship.
What ship are we talking about?
The RMS Queen Mary.
Oh.
Which is not something that most people know, actually.
All right.
So,
All right.
hence why I had to do a lot of research, but also, I don't know.
All right. Let's get into it.
I will say that I didn't think I was into ships. Okay, so in case you didn't watch or listen to our but one of our previous podcasts where we talked about my ghost stories.
Yeah.
One of the main ghost stories that I offered was something that happened to me on the Queen Mary, which now I'm kind of questioning it, but we'll get into that.
Okay.
I didn't think I was into the Queen Mary, or into ships in general, but while I was doing the research for this, I was, like, getting really into it.
Yeah.
So let's begin.
All right.
First of all, let's start with what is the RMS Queen Mary, because unless you grew up in Southern California, you probably are not quite familiar with it.
Or if you're not in paranormal circles. Like, I've heard of it, but
Yeah.
I also listen to, like, 17,000 paranormal podcasts on any given week. So,
Exactly.
You know.
The Queen Mary, the RMS Queen Mary, was a British ocean liner that primarily sailed the North Atlantic Ocean from 1936 to 1967.
So, kicked off during World War II?
Yeah, it kicked off a little bit before World War II.
Yeah.
We'll get into that,
okay.
though. Yeah,
Wait,
because...
Okay, possible spoilers. Is this the one that's called The Grey Ghost sometimes?
Yeah, but don't put that in yet.
Okay.
I mean, you can.
All right,
but that's
I'm going to cut that out.
No, you can keep it in. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yes, this is that ship. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Originally, the ship was being built by Cunard Line, the Cunard Line in 1930.
Okay.
But it wasn't named yet. It was just known as the Cunard Hall number 534.
Okay.
But Cunard ran into financial issues because of this little thing that happened in 1930s called the Great Depression.
Whoopsie doodle.
Yeah. Probably not the best time to build a ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Cunard merged their company with another company that was struggling, the White Star Line.
Famous for the Olympic and the Britannic and the Titanic.
Yeah. So, actually, I found out that the White Star Line, even after the whole Titanic incident, did not necessarily suffer.
How?
Because, well, it's not like there were many options to
That's
get
true.
across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
But the Great Depression did kind of take a hit on them. So
It's wild that the iceberg didn't take a hit and the Depression did. So,
you know what's hilarious? I found out that the route that the Queen Mary took was like southern, so specifically make sure to stay away from
That's fair.
iceberg.
I don't blame them.
Yeah, same. Don't want that to happen again. So, the two companies merged, became the Cunard White Star Line, and Cunard had been making this ship in order to compete with German and French ships that were like shiny and fast and new, and they wanted a British version.
Okay.
So they made this ship along with the sister ship, which was the Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
And these became the first two ships that had a weekly transatlantic service.
Oh, wow.
Weekly. So it would take about 5 days, like at max. It would take 5 days
Wow.
for them to go to Southampton, England, to New York.
Okay. Do you know how long the Titanic was said to be?
I don't. I should have done research on that. But
That's fine.
it's for context. The Queen Mary was tied with the Normandy, which was the French ship, for like fastest ship at the time. But then the Queen Mary ended up beating the Normandy and held this title as like the fastest ship for like 15 years.
Damn.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's very impressive.
Yeah.
It was a little smaller than the Queen Elizabeth, so it wasn't the biggest ship, but it was the fastest ship.
Okay.
I won't go into like numbers of how fast the Queen Mary was, but I will say that the fastest transatlantic trip that she had only took 3 days.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she could carry about 2,000 passengers and employed about 1,000 crew members, so generally about 3,000 people on the ship at a time. And she was a beautiful ship. They really went into the Art Deco. Yeah, Art Deco kind of vibe with it. Had like a grand ballroom and everything. It was a luxury ship.
Okay, and also if you don't know what Art Deco is, I heard a really good analogy for all of those people who really like fantasy novels. Art Deco is the dwarven architecture with all of like the sharp lines and the big shapes and the spiky, but they're still all squared off and stuff. That's the Art Deco kind of style.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. Also, if you hear any like odd looking or barking or anything like that, we are recording at Celeste's today.
Yeah.
And Celeste's dog is about. She is a very cutie and
Thanks. She's kind of a menace.
and is now glaring at Celeste. I think possibly for letting this other human of unknown origin into the apartment.
It's okay. See, the more you come over, the more she'll get used to you.
Okay, that's fair.
And then she won't care anymore.
All right, I'll try.
If she starts licking her paws, I'm gonna put her in the other room because I hate that sound.
Okay.
Hopefully the mics don't pick it up.
But if they do, I'll try and edit around it. But just a heads up in case we don't catch all of that. That's what the background noise is.
Yeah.
I figured I'd mention it while we're still only 8 minutes in.
Yeah, she's currently just staring out the window, so hopefully that'll keep her entertained for a bit.
Because, that dog across the street is just so interesting to watch.
For her, it really is.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Queen Mary.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, this is I'm going to have a lot of fun facts about this ship where I just didn't know where else to put them.
Okay.
So, fun fact. The Queen Mary had a total of 56 different types of wood on board. And it was like representing one for each of the British states at the time.
Okay.
But 6, and this is straight from like the Queen Mary website.
Okay.
So 6 of those types of wood are now actually extinct, making the Queen Mary one of the few places that they can still be found.
That's cool. That's so cool. Oh my God.
I know. I mean, it sucks that they're extinct, but also that's trippy,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. But it's also, do you know what kind of woods are now extinct that it currently has?
You know what? I'll look it up and then I'll send you like a note. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, so she actually had also a nickname known as like the Ship of Woods because it was like, they were being very fancy with her. They really wanted her to compete with the others.
Yeah.
Another fun fact is that there's like a rumor, like a confirmed rumor, quote unquote, that she was actually supposed to be called the Queen Victoria.
Okay.
But they wanted the approval of the monarch at the time, who was King George V. And King George V was married to Queen Mary, right?
Okay.
So that was his wife.
So George V is Elizabeth's father?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. They went up to George V and they were like, Your Majesty, we are pleased to inform you that Cunard wishes your approval to name our newest and greatest liner after England's greatest queen. And his response was, My wife will be delighted.
Oh, no.
So how are they going to be like, no, King, you're wrong. They just
It's
changed.
actually your grandma.
Yeah, it's actually your grandmother. Awkward.
Yeah.
But they couldn't say no to the king, so they just renamed it the Queen Mary.
Okay.
But
I wonder what would have happened. Did they still behead people in the 1930s? Like...
No, I think it was just like a respect thing.
Yeah, okay.
They were just like, oh well, I guess like it's still a queen, and
Yeah.
Yeah. The fun side note is that the Queen Mary on her maiden voyage was announced by Queen Mary.
No.
So that was cute.
Yay.
Yeah. So she was a luxury cruise line for a bit. And then World War II happened.
Okay.
Woo! At the beginning of the war, the Queen Mary was not being used yet. In 1940, she was docked in New York, along with the Queen Elizabeth and the Normandy, which was the French ship.
Okay.
So...
And these are all roughly classed about the same for, like, speed and all of that.
And size.
Yeah. And the Elizabeth was the sister ship to the Mary. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The three... I actually have, like, a little newspaper thing. But it's, like, the three biggest ships at the time were all sitting in New York's harbor, just waiting.
Okay.
And they waited for 2 weeks. And then it was like, okay, we're going to, like, all right, let's use these ships. Let's use these ships to transport troops across the Atlantic.
Okay.
So they weren't necessarily going to be combat ships. They were just going to be, transporting.
Yeah.
The Queen Mary was repainted and refitted for war. All her furniture was taken out. The bunk beds were installed for the soldiers. Mm-hmm. The portholes were painted black, and her exterior was painted navy gray. And because, like you mentioned before, of her new paint and her intense speed, the ship was nicknamed the Grey Ghost, which is like, I feel like that's such a cool name.
That's such a cool name.
That's such a cool, it's also very on brand for this podcast. The Grey Ghost.
I mean, honestly, we should do a trope talk at some point because I've already done a trope talk on the White Lady. And we should do a trope talk on the Grey Lady and the Red Lady and the Vampire. And there's really a long list of potential trope talks that we could do, and the Grey Lady is one of them. Anyway.
Well, I did take a course on supernatural fan fiction. I mean, fan fiction. Just Twilight. That's the entire course.
I mean, to be fair.
Or actually, it was a Twilight fan fiction.
50 Shades was
50
a Twilight
Shades. There we go.
Fantasy of a different sort, but.
No, I took a course on supernatural, like, elements in literature.
Yeah. One of my senior capstones was the transition from supernatural to Christian iconography in Jane Eyre. Anyway.
We are learned people, and we are not here to play.
No, we are not. No. Except a little bit.
Except a little bit.
To keep Clem from barking at people. Anyway.
Clemmy. The ship was nicknamed the Grey Ghost.
Okay.
And after all the modifications, she could hold up to 15,000 men, which was an entire division.
Damn.
And remember that when it was a luxury liner, it held 2,000 passengers and 1,000 crew members.
Which implies to me that they don't care about the soldiers' personal space.
A lot of them were sleeping on the poop deck.
Yep.
You know what? I didn't save it. But if you look up, like, the Queen Mary or the Grey Ghost, you will see it is crowded.
Yeah.
It is legit crowded.
Oh, damn.
Packed.
Yeah. And that's all 15,000?
Yeah, that's like a division, basically.
Yeah. That looks like a claustrophobe's nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they really only put them in like that during, like, warm months, I would hope.
Well, I would hope cold months because then the heat's not miserable.
Well, it's the Atlantic, though, so it's super cold already. So you would think that they would want to.
Anyway.
But the point is, the most people that she has ever held in a single transport was 16,682.
That is a lot of people.
So if you need, like, a scale reference. Oh, by the way, if you look up the Grey Ghost, look up, like, Grey Ghost Queen Mary, because there's apparently, like, a noir book or something called the Grey Ghost. But anyway, so for scale reference, Madison Square Garden holds 20,000 people.
That's
so
a
it's
lot of
almost
people.
An arena full of people.
Yeah, good grief.
Fun fact. Winston Churchill rode on the Queen Mary a few times, but always under an alias so that nobody knew.
That's fair.
We should bomb this ship. It has Winston Churchill on it.
I mean, to be fair, like, they still do that for political figures a lot today.
Yeah.
Like Air Force One. I was in DC yesterday, and, like, there was a shitload of helicopters and Secret Service on the tidal basin.
Okay.
Because it has the direct view of the White House. You knew that it wasn't the president's helicopter because there's always at least 2 or 3 when the president's flying, so it decreases the statistics that someone nefarious will hit down the actual one. Anyway, that was a tangent.
No, that's fine. Tangents are fine.
That I'm going to try and convince myself not to cut out, so if you didn't hear any of that, congrats on being confused.
All right. So in total, during the war, Queen Mary transported 800,000 people.
800,000. And over how many years?
I know it was like 600,000 miles, 60,000 miles or something like that. But I don't remember. Well, she was commissioned in 1940. I think in 1941 is when they actually sent them out. So then when did the war end?
45.
So about 4 years?
Yeah, 200,000 a year. So hundreds of thousands of people.
100,000 people.
Moving very quickly.
Yes.
So there must have been...
technically they moved slower during World War II because they didn't want to, they wanted to be stealthy and careful, and they had to kind of zigzag.
Oh, yeah.
Because that way they didn't have to worry about U-boats. Yeah, exactly. That old, people want to bomb our ship sort of thing.
Details.
I say our ship. This is a British ship, but whatever. It was half ours, okay?
Okay.
Because it kept going.
Well, it's in America now. So.
Exactly.
All right. So, if they're going in and out a whole bunch during the war, there's probably some weird stuff that happened.
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Real quick.
Yeah.
After the war, Queen Mary was given back to Cunard White Star, became a luxury cruise line again. But by the late 1940s and early 1950s, air travel was the hip new thing.
Oh, yeah.
And most people wanted to fly instead of taking a ship, because why would you take a ship for 3 days when you could fly for 7 hours?
That's true.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point, I might choose the ship just for the experience.
At this point, I want the ship just because air travel is the basic one, but at the time air travel was the new thing, you know.
Well, also I feel like if you adjust for inflation, you're still paying out the butt for a plane ticket at that point.
Yeah.
So it's a hip new thing for slightly cheaper because again, 8 hours versus several days. Anyway.
But despite it all, the Queen Mary kept on chugging until the late, technically until the late 1960s.
Oh, yeah. Because you said she was decommissioned in 66?
67.
67.
Yeah. So, by that time, the company was pretty much losing money on the Queen Mary instead of making money. So, in 1967, she was retired and taking on her last voyage to the city of Long Beach, California, where she had been purchased. And I'm glad she was purchased because she was almost sold for scrap metal.
And those 6 different trees would have been lost forever.
I know. So, she was purchased and converted into a hotel where she's permanently docked in Long Beach. And on September 27th, 1967, she completed her 1,001st voyage, or her last crossing of the North Atlantic, having carried a whopping total of 2,112,000 passengers over 3,792,227 miles.
Damn.
Which is 6,102,998 kilometers for anyone who uses that system. Under the command of Captain John Treasure Jones.
Which is the most...
Oh my god, that is such a...
It's an aggressively,
I literally looked it up.
Mariner name.
Yes.
If he wasn't a mariner, I would expect him to be an archaeologist or Indiana Jones, who,
I literally looked it up to make sure. I was like, was he born with this name? Or did he adopt it later? But this is legit, name.
Oh my god.
His father also was Treasure Jones.
Wait, is that a family middle name or is it a hyphenated last name?
It's a family middle name.
Okay. I wish my middle name was Treasure.
I know, same. So under the command of Captain John Treasure Jones, which was her last captain, she sailed from Southampton for the last time on October 31st with 1,093 passengers and 806 crew, and arrived in Long Beach on the 9th of December.
Wait, where was she leaving from to get to Long Beach?
She went from... technically, they went from Southampton, and then they went around Cape Horn, and then they went to Long
bottom
Beach.
of South America.
Yeah. I have a Life magazine from the time.
Okay.
And they'd hit a whole expose on, the Queen Mary. Just don't look at anything else on that magazine, because it's really not... with the times anymore. Okay. I'm going to do a little quote. I just loved how intense this was.
Okay.
Or this section of the article is from the perception of the Queen Mary, of the ship. So this is going to be in first person of her.
Okay.
This was when she hooted her horn at the Queen Elizabeth,
Okay.
who was her sister ship, as they were leaving for their last voyage.
Yeah.
We blinked our lights 3 times, as we always do when we pass. But for this last time, we also hooted 3 deep, long blasts. My own hooter can be heard for 10 miles. It is set for 2 octaves and 2 notes below middle C so that it won't cause too much discomfort to the passengers, but I'm afraid it does make me sound rather like your American actress, Tallulah Bankhead.
Hang on, now I want to look up Tallulah Bankhead.
We blinked our lights 3 times, as we always do when we pass, but for this last time we also hooted 3 deep, long blasts. Well, as I say, we hooted and the Elizabeth answered with 3 hoots of her own. The passengers behaved as if it were New Year's Eve or the end of a war, running about from one end of the sun deck to the other, waving their arms, kissing each other, wiping their eyes, and staring out across the water until the lights of the Elizabeth vanished. It didn't take long. We went away from each other at 56 knots. People keep saying it's the end of an era, but that's not quite true. My era ended long before I did.
No.
I know. I was like, why is this so poignant for like a quote about a ship?
Yeah. All right, and I did not record the tangent about Tallulah Bankhead, but
apparently, okay, so yes, this article references Tallulah Bankhead, but I kind of cut it out because I didn't know who she was.
And I got really, really curious and Googled it up, and I'm going to do the same thing I just said to Celeste. Think of the most aggressively 1930s actress you could possibly think of, specifically like end of the 20s, start of the 30s, like not quite 90s sperm brows, but close, like...
Just think transatlantic accent.
Yeah. Transatlantic accent with a really short bob. Like, that's Tallulah Bankhead. Also an aggressively interesting name. Like,
I know. I love it.
Like, John Treasure Jones, Tallulah Bankhead.
People were not afraid to name their children, like, fun names. Yeah. Okay? We should bring that back.
Yeah.
So she's permanently docked, was converted into like a hotel museum type thing. And I'm not going to go into like the nitty gritty of everything that happened after that. If you really want to find out about the tragedy of this Queen Mary being basically hot potatoed from company to company, who didn't know what to do with her, I suggest you read up on it, because I don't even consider myself interested in business dealings. But after hearing everything the ship went through, and then like the fact that people don't know how to respect her after she gets in Long Beach. Like, she's okay now. I think they gave her back to the city of Long Beach. But the point is,
wait, what happened when she got to Long Beach? Do you know?
It was like this company bought her and then this company bought her, but they kept like renovating, quote unquote, instead of just restoring. Oh, you know?
Yeah. Well,
because it was like the 80s and they were just like,
yeah.
Capitalism.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking, like, I'm trying to remember dates from archaeology class, but, like, unless you have a designation as, like, an official historic thing, it wasn't until the 90s that, like, you would be aiming to restore without that designation as, like, an official historic thing. But I don't remember the exact dates, but...
California is not exactly good at preserving its history.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's coming from a California native, so...
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Yeah, but basically, if you're interested in that, look it up. I highly suggest it. Fun fact, at some point, a Disney company owned it, and they were talking about, like, Disney cruises, and I was like, I'm so glad it did not become like a Disney cruise.
Can you imagine the havoc that 5-year-olds on the ship for the first time would wreak on 6 extinct trees?
Seriously.
Are the trees still, is that wood still on there?
Well, it came from the Queen Mary website, so I'm gonna guess that it's still on there, because otherwise they probably wouldn't advertise like, we let a bunch of trees go extinct. So fun fact, the Queen Mary was in an action movie starring Frank Sinatra called Assault on a Queen.
Oh my god.
So
is it on like
there's a movie poster?
Well, if that's not the most aggressively 50s movie poster I've ever seen.
It's like, early 50s or late 50s, early 60s, I can't remember.
Yeah. Wait, and so what's the plot?
I don't know. I think like the Queen Mary is literally just a set piece. Like, I think it advertised that it's the Queen Mary because it's obviously a well-known ship. But
Assault on a Queen.
I looked up I Wikipedia'd the plot, but I can't remember.
Okay.
It's like
I'm looking
Frank
it up
Sinatra is like a scuba diver who finds some treasure or something. I don't know. Lisa can give us the rundown.
1966, a motley crew of treasure hunters planned to rob the cruise liner RMS Queen Mary using a recovered World War II German submarine.
I love that. Isn't
Anyway.
it like a movie from the 60s that takes place in like World War II or something? It's one of those.
Adventure, crime, thriller. Okay, what's the longer thing? I'm like glancing through IMDb and I'm not finding too
I guess
much
it's
more
not
than
too
like
popular.
the 2 sentences.
Should we have a viewing party?
I feel like we should have
Assault
a
the
viewing
Queen?
party. Right.
Patreon exclusive.
Wait. When treasure hunters in the Caribbean come across a sunken U-boat, they also find that it was scuttled by its captain and is more or less intact.
If the captain isn't Treasure Jones, I don't want it.
So the impression I get is that it takes place after World War II because, again, of all the scuttled stuff. Final tangent, and then we'll get back on topic. I'm just going to read this entire review.
Tangents. I love tangents.
When treasure hunters in the Caribbean come across a sunken U-boat, they also find that it was scuttled by its captain and is more or less intact. Eric Laufner is a former World War II U-boat captain, and American Mark Britton served on subs in the Pacific. Laufner proposes they give up their treasure hunt and instead turn to piracy. In a few days' time, the RMS Queen Mary will be in the area with millions of dollars in cash, gold, and jewels in its strong room.
I don't remember
Dun, dun,
that.
dun.
You sold me. Let's watch it.
Shout out to Gary KMCD for that
For giving us
summary.
a more cohesive summary than the Wikipedia page did.
Yeah. All right. So I'll also put a poll on the Patreon about whether or not we should do a viewing party of this.
Hell yeah. I'm going to vote on it. So yes.
All right.
First, to set this up, the Queen Mary has been permanently docked. The Queen Elizabeth sailed for a few more years after her. But the Queen Mary also had another ship built, or the Cunard White Star Line also built another ship called the Queen Mary 2.
Ooh.
So this photo is from, I think it was like 2004 or 2006, where the Queen Mary 2 passed by the Queen Mary and honked their horn.
Aw.
And the Queen Mary honked its one singular horn that was still working. And the Long Beach, Skyriders put "Hail to the Queens" in the sky.
That's
and
great.
after doing research for like an entire day, I got to this image and I started crying. I don't know why. I got so attached to this ship.
Oh my god, that's so cool though.
I know. So the Queen Elizabeth II has also passed by the ship, and had one other ship, but I can't remember. But the point is, like, even though the Queen Mary is retired, it's still very prominent in that whole ship lore.
Yeah. Didn't BuzzFeed Unsolved also go?
Yeah. Because
Anyway.
that's where Ryan had his ghost experience. That was just like the toothpaste moving. So what a mood, though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he also grew up in LA, so he knows.
He knows things.
There's an attachment here. When you grow up in that area, I think there's an attachment.
Yeah.
So, speaking of deaths and hauntings, here's the thing. Here's my disclaimer.
Okay.
I don't know how haunted the ship actually is. Because look, I know I literally chose this topic because I went on a ghost tour and was told the ship was haunted and had like an experience, a haunting experience.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. A lot of the stories surrounding the death and ghosts on the ship don't really add up with historic facts.
Ain't that always the way?
I know. So I'm going to do my best. Like, okay, for example, apparently there was a paranormal investigator who went on the ship, and he was like, oh, there's these two little ghost girls, Dana and Penny, and they're haunting the ship, and they were murdered by their father in this room. It was like room 474. The problem is that at the time that those murders apparently took place, that room didn't exist. It was actually two rooms, and he couldn't pinpoint which room it
Or
was
which end of the-
apparently originally.
Oh my god.
And then there, after some like historic digging, there actually was an incident with two little girls, Dana and Penny, who were murdered by their father. However, that incident took place in Roanoke, Virginia.
Oh my god.
Not on the Queen Mary.
Oh my god.
So I'm guessing he saw like the telegram that they had sent to their grandmother who was sailing on the Queen Mary.
Oh.
That was like,
That was
your
like, guess what?
grandchildren are dead, sorry.
Yeah.
And he like used those names.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, I'm going to start by saying that a lot of death did happen on the Queen Mary.
Yeah.
So I don't think we necessarily have to kitsch shit up or whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, sometimes if you're, I don't know, if you're doing a ghost tour, feel like two named dead children is slightly more dramatic and tragic than several thousand soldiers that all of whose names you don't quite know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's like, I don't want to be the boy who cried wolf and like say, oh, these ghosts happen, and then they don't, and it takes away from the actual deaths. You know what I mean?
And that's what I've noticed sometimes, like, especially with the myth episodes that I've done, is that it's just like, okay, well, the oldest one, okay, I'm thinking of King Arthur in this. Like, the oldest record is
That's a fun.
is literally just like this guy who fought these people with this wonky looking sword, and that's about it.
I like the fact that this sword was wonky looking. Like,
I don't
like
remember if that was the actual detail, but it's like,
but
it's something
I
like
want
that.
to believe it. It was just like shaped like a S or something.
Yeah. But okay, friends. This was quite a bit of a tangent, which I have since cut out. You can find the full thing on the Patreon. The point I was trying to make is mostly that with time, legends grow and change, and the longer you go, the more chance there is for change and adaptation to the different hauntings and the ghost stories. Again, it was a long tangent. It's like 8 minutes long. We call Lancelot an OC or a Mary Sue and a few other things. The full 8-minute thing will be on Patreon, but suffice it to say, the point being, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is pretty cool. We want to watch the movie. And the original legends of things are not always what you hear them to be. Anyway, back to the actual thing.
Let's get into the ghosties.
All right. What we all came here for.
Yeah. So technically, I'm not saying the Queen Mary isn't haunted, but I am saying that she might not be as haunted as people make her out to be.
Are you telling me people exaggerate stories?
For the sake of entertainment.
Oh my god.
So that being said, I'm not gonna get too much. I'm gonna try to talk about actual recorded deaths.
Okay.
So I'm not really gonna get into Jackie, which is the most popular ghost story. It's like a little girl who haunts the pool area.
I think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, except there were no recorded deaths in either of the two pools.
Oh. Details. You know.
Yeah. So, So Death on the Queen Mary. You would think most of these, and probably most of them did happen in World War II, but before the ship was even finished, there was a construction worker named Malcolm Atkin who fell from a scaffold at the stern of the ship's hull in 1934 and died. So,
Damn.
that sucks. Also, in 1936, this is mostly crew members, seaman Arthur John Francis Golding fractured his skull and was buried at sea. On her final voyage to California, Leonard Horsburgh, he was a fish cook. He suffered from a cerebral hemorrhage due to heat stroke and died off the coast of Rio de Janeiro.
Oh.
So technically not on the ship. However, I don't really subscribe to the theory that just because you don't die at a specific place doesn't mean you can't haunt it.
Yeah. I mean,
especially if there's like an attachment there.
Yeah, like I've heard of hauntings less of the location that you died and more where you either spend a bunch of time or a bunch of emotional energy, because there is a theory like what you said is sort of, it's not necessarily he died in that location, but maybe that was a big place for him in his history. So just because he didn't die right there doesn't mean he might not revisit there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, I will say that my main source is from a former tour guide on the Queen Mary. He had worked on the Queen Mary in 2015. And so I want to trust him because he seems to know. He's also kind of skeptical. So, like...
Yeah, that's good.
You know, it's good to be a little skeptical and not just buy into everything.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the more famous and one of the more tragic deaths. So, Jay Petter, I think his name was John, but he was an 18-year-old engine worker who, in 1966, during a routine safety check, was tragically crushed to death in a watertight door.
Oh, no.
It was engine door number 13. Yeah.
Triskaidekaphobia.
So the circumstance, is that the fear of the number 13?
Yeah. Oh. Okay. It took me forever to figure out how to pronounce it. And then I took ancient Greek. And then it was like, it's literally 3 and 10 fear.
I'm sorry if anybody has
Triskaidekaphobia.
Triskaidekaphobia.
Tris is 3, Kai is and, Deca is 10, phobia is fear.
Yes.
Fun facts with Lisa.
So yes, it was door number 13. The circumstances around the event kind of remain unknown because no witnesses came forward. They kind of just found his body afterwards. Yeah. There's speculation that maybe he was messing with the levers or maybe he like timed it, wrong because it was a routine check, but maybe he thought he had more time. But we don't actually know. However, people have claimed to see a shadowy figure around the engine room that he died in.
Okay.
And also people have heard like somebody in the engine room when it's empty. Oh, it's not a ship that runs anymore. So
yeah. So no real reason for someone to be down there.
Yeah. But I will say that door number 13 was taken out when they were converting it to a hotel. So the actual door is not there anymore. Okay. Yeah.
I wonder if people still hear stuff right there, though. Like where the hinges would have been.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Yeah. That's creepy. This was just a sad circumstance. In 1949, Second Senior Officer William Eric Stark, he was trying to take a drink of a gin. And so he took a gin bottle. Okay. And he like poured himself and he took a swig. But what he didn't know is that that was an old gin bottle and he had accidentally consumed carbon tetrachloride, which had been stored in an old gin bottle. And this is why you take off your labels.
Yes. Or put in like a new one.
Exactly. Or put in like writing, do not drink this. This is poison.
Like, put a thing of like washi tape or something on it. Like, this is the drink pattern and this is the tetrachloride pattern.
So the story that I was told when I took the tour was like, oh, he had just gotten a promotion and to celebrate, his captain was like, oh, go to my quarters and get yourself a drink. I don't know how true that story is. Yeah. But he did accidentally consume carbon tetrachloride instead of gin. So he was hospitalized and he like felt sick like pretty soon after. So he knew that. Yeah.
And I feel like alcohol dizzy is going to be different from like dying dizzy.
Exactly. So, however, he did not pass away on the ship. He passed away at the hospital once they docked. Yeah. But like I said before, I'm not one to say that you can't haunt something that you probably spent years of your life on.
Yeah, again, it's the time and emotional energy thing.
Yes. Those were like the main like crew like deaths or whatever. I'm going to now go into the HMS Curacao. Have you heard of this?
I have not heard of the HMS Curacao.
Okay. Do you remember when I said...
All right, just so you know, in case you hear growling, Annette sneezed in Kentucky, and therefore Clem is pissed off.
Honestly. All right, you remember earlier when I said that I'm not quite sure if the ghost experience that I had was legit. Yeah. I mean, it was legit. I felt nauseous. Yeah. But I don't know if the story was legit. Oh. So here's the thing. I think I was mixing it up with... the Curacao, and because this was like 7 or 8 years ago that I took this tour, so sorry if I'm inaccurate. But I think I was mixing up with what happened to the Curacao and the prisoners of war, because I think there were prisoners of war, But like I mentioned before, during World War II, they had to take measures to make sure that there weren't any U-boats that could like track them and blow them up.
Yeah.
So, what they did was the Queen Mary would kind of zigzag to make sure that it was less of a chance of getting hit. And it also had like little escort ships that would always be like maybe 2 or 3 escort ships that would escort the Queen Mary. And for most of the time, this was smooth sailing and like nothing really happened. But on October 2nd, 1942, HMS Curacao was the escort ship for the Queen Mary.
Okay.
Unfortunately, because it was zigzagging, it was actually the Curacao, and I'm trying to like, this was a complete accident, but the Curacao and the Queen Mary were too close together.
Oh no.
The Curacao and the Queen Mary were too close together, and unfortunately, the Curacao got in front of the Queen Mary because it was escorting, and the Queen Mary was very fast and essentially like sliced the Curacao in half.
Oh no.
Yes.
So it's the front of the Queen Mary into the side of the Curacao?
Yeah. So because it was zigzagging, and I'm like making motions with my hands, but this is a podcast.
Yeah.
So I can't really. So because it was zigzagging, I think that it just like zigzagged like that.
Oh, so
like, and kind of sliced it in half.
So the Queen Mary, one of Queen Mary's zigs cut off one of the Curacao's zags. And
It did not. Yeah. And so this was tragic. It cut it in half. A bunch of soldiers were now in the water.
Yeah.
And the Queen Mary didn't stop. It couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Because there was still the risk of German
boats, U-boats,
firing at them.
Yeah.
So they had to keep going until they got to shore.
Yeah.
There were about 439 men on the Curacao. And when they came back to pick up the survivors, there were only about 99 that survived.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a little more than a fifth made it.
Yeah.
Wow.
What's more tragic is that I have to like double check my research, but I'm pretty sure that they also didn't like inform the families yet because they didn't want, like, it was basically friendly fire.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't want to advertise friendly fire during a war.
Yeah.
So I actually have a first-hand account
Okay.
of the Curacao incident. So this is from a man named Alfred Johnson. He was working on the Queen Mary, or he was on board the Queen when this incident happened. So it was 1942, and I was 22 years old and a seaman in the Merchant Navy on the Queen Mary. We were returning to Glasgow from New York, which was a 4 or 5 day journey. The Queen Mary was carrying about 20,000 American troops to join the Allied forces. She was known as a hornet's nest in the war, as there were lots of nationalities on the ship. There were 2 of us on the poop deck on the aft of the ship, and we were manning the 6-inch gun in case we came under attack. What good would we have done with one gun? I had no idea. A cruiser called HMS Curacao met us 200 miles off the coast to escort us into Greenock. I could see her clearly as I was on the aft. We could see our escort zigzagging in front of us. It was common for the ships and cruisers to zigzag to confuse the U-boats. In this particular case, however, the escort was very, very close to us. I said to my mate, "I know she's zigzagging all over the place in front of us. I'm sure we're going to hit her." And sure enough, the Queen Mary sliced the cruiser in two like a piece of butter, straight through the 6-inch armored plating. The Queen Mary just carried on going. We were doing about 25 knots. It was the policy not to stop and pick up survivors, even if they were waving at you. It was too dangerous, as the threat of U-boats was always present. My mate and I wanted to do something, so after the collision, I said to my mate, "Come on, let's sling this over," and we released the cork life raft into the sea. Whether anyone from the cruiser managed to climb aboard the raft, I have no idea. The Queen Mary continued her journey to Greenock, dropped anchor, and discharged the American soldiers. In her wake, a tragedy was unfolding behind her in the Atlantic. I estimate that about 600 men were aboard the cruiser, and I don't know if there were any survivors or not, as the collision was covered up and wasn't reported in the papers. The case went to court many years later in 1949, and the Queen Mary was exonerated of blame, and the whole event was forgotten. I wonder what they told the families of those men on the cruiser.
Oh no.
So I will also say that there was not any record of deaths on board during the wartime. So we don't actually know if there were any soldiers that were on the ship that died. I do know that the Queen Mary had a 40-foot gash on her after the Curacao incident, but I don't think she took in water.
Wow.
So, but that being said, I also don't know if there were many men that died on the Queen Mary just in those 4 years that they were at war.
Yeah. I mean, statistically speaking, it's probably likely.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'm sure if they were just buried at sea.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So the reason I'm saying all that is because sometimes people say that they see soldiers on board, like soldiers in World War II uniforms.
Huh.
So I don't know if it could be Curacao or if it could be people who died on board who were just never reported. Yeah. Obviously, in war, a lot of people die and you just never know what happened to them.
Yeah.
So that's a possible,
There is an explanation.
That's a possible explanation. But those were like the main. I'm sure that there are more ghosts. Like some people say they see the ghost of like Winston Churchill. And I'm like, I don't know if the Queen Mary was important enough to him.
Yeah. I mean,
to haunt it.
The amount of times I've heard of a Winston Churchill ghost is like his afterlife just must be so chaotic.
Seriously, he's just hopping from place to place. He's just traveling.
Yeah.
So those are pretty much the ones that I could find actual historic record on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those were like the people who died on the Queen Mary. Whether or not they're still there is a phenomena that we have no real proof of.
Oh.
Although, and I will say that sometimes people say that Treasure Jones is on the ship.
I would love to believe that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's important enough to him, but I wish.
Yes.
I would love to meet him. I'd love to meet Captain Treasure Jones.
I just want to meet someone genuinely named Treasure Jones.
Let's name our children Treasure Jones. Neither of our last names are Jones, but I'm good.
I feel like, also, it would take a bit of convincing to get each of our respective partners on board with that.
Yeah, that's fair. Ooh, I just saw. Apparently, the Lady in White is also on the Queen Mary.
Ooh.
But like I said, we don't know who she is. We don't know like why she would be there. It's just like people seeing things.
Yeah. Well, as you can look back into the archives and find the woman in white trope overview, sometimes she's an omen of death.
Oh, no.
Yeah, referencing to the Banshee and to the woman in white.
I love that Banshee episode. I love Banshees.
I'm so proud of that episode.
It's so good.
Thanks.
Okay. Anyway, so that was the history of the Queen Mary. If you are ever in Long Beach, California, I recommend taking the tour.
Yeah.
Like, take the history tour, take the ghost tour. I can't say for sure if the ghost tour is accurate, but you know what? Like,
it's a fun time.
It's a fun time, even when it's not. You get to go to like certain places on the ship that you can't go to in normal days.
Can you like still stay overnight there?
Yeah, it's still a hotel.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
And they reopened after the Panini. I think in December of 2021. I think so. It's like recently reopened. And
it's the website's still up at least.
It's still around. Like, it's enough of a staple in Long Beach Harbor that I don't think they're gonna. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. And if she survived World War II, the Industrial Revolution, and all those companies getting a hold of her, then I think she can survive a little longer.
Yeah. I mean, the booking links all still seem to be active. So if you want to support the Queen Mary and possibly get haunted, go do that.
Yeah.
All right. So,
I hope you guys enjoyed.
Yay!
The
first
stories.
episode.
Yay! I can't wait to do another.
All right. So with all that said, if you want to support the show, it's patreon.com/drearymidnight. If you want to follow the show on Instagram at drearymidnightpod. If you want to shoot us an email, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. The website, drearymidnightpodcast.wordpress.com. And with all of that said, be aware of ghosts and World War II. Just in general. Don't do it.
And name your kids Treasure Jones.
Yes, name your
Just
children
do it.
Treasure Jones. And safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.